Hello, my name is Penelope, and this is a story about me, my overbearing parents, and my first boyfriend. I'm sure you can tell that this is a horrible mix from the start. And it was. In fact, it was so bad that I ended up finding my mom's missing jewelry on my boyfriend's Instagram. That's insane, right? Well, wait till you hear how it really ended up there. First, you have to understand something about my parents. I'm an only child, so growing up, they gave me a lot of attention. I mean, a lot. But don't get me wrong. I love my parents, and the attention that they gave me let me know how much they loved me. However, when I started getting older, their protection of me reached crazy levels. It got to the point where I couldn't do anything a regular teenager would normally do. I was always under their control, and it made me feel imprisoned. I remember when I wanted to try out for the soccer team at school. I really loved sitting in the stands and watching my friends play. So when I went to try out, my parents shut me down quick. I needed them to sign off, but they told me no, and that it was too dangerous. Then there was a time when I wanted to go on a camping trip with the school. I thought my parents would allow it because it wasn't far away from the neighborhood, and there would be multiple teacher chaperones watching us. However, again, I was wrong. They told me it was too dangerous, and they didn't think I was ready for it. It was so frustrating. Why did they have to be so unfair? Couldn't they see things from my point of view? Then came high school. I was determined to break away from the hold that my parents had on my social life. I started hanging out with friends more, ignoring my parents' constant nagging, and was finally having fun. That's when I met John. John was a bit of a mystery to everyone. He was aloof and popular. Nobody knew too much about him, and when he looked at me, I could tell that he was sizing me up. I really liked him, and he seemed to like me too. So after spending time together during the day, and some phone calls that lasted late into the night, we started dating. However, like so many Romeo and Juliet moments, we were forbidden to see each other. This was mainly my parents' doing, of course. They didn't like John, and they didn't hold their tongue. They told me repeatedly to break up with him. One time, we even had a huge argument about my life, though it could hardly be called that anymore. They screamed that I was making a mistake. They screamed things like, "He's no good," and "We forbid you to see him." That argument lasted a long time, with us going back and forth. I told them that it was my life to live. I was making good grades, and they had no right to tell me who I should or should not date. In the end, I stormed off to my room and locked myself in for the rest of the night. It was a horrible fight, but I was so upset that I didn't want anything to do with them at the moment. A week went by without us talking to each other. I was still going to date who I wanted, and my parents still didn't approve. One day, my mother came to me and told me that some of her jewelry was missing. I told her that I haven't seen it. That's when she gave me a sideways look. Then she said something that really set me off. "Did your boyfriend see it?" I knew right away what she meant. I just didn't think that she would stoop so low as to say it. I told her no, then she stormed away. It was becoming a habit in our house. We never seemed to be able to finish one conversation anymore without it ending with someone walking away in a huff. The next day, while I was out with John, I told him about our most recent fight and what my mom said about her jewelry going missing. He was shocked. What would I even do with women's jewelry? We laughed and spent the day joking about the situation, which just confirmed what I knew all along. My parents were just looking for someone to blame for something, and he was the easy choice. Days passed with little problem. I thought everything was going back to normal, at least a small sense of what normal started to mean to me. But that all changed thanks to Instagram. Well, more accurately, what I found on Instagram. I was having a normal day when John texted me and said that he and his friends went on a crazy hiking trip. When I asked to see pictures, John told me that he uploaded some on his Instagram account. I was about to check it out, and that's when everything changed. As soon as I searched his name, a different account popped up to what seemed to be an additional account by his name. It also had his profile picture. I found it pretty weird, so I clicked on it and I requested to follow. A few minutes after, my request was approved, and there was my shock. The account was full of jewelry pictures for sale, but not just any jewelry. It looked like my mom's jewelry. I thought I was imagining things. I mean, it couldn't have been the jewelry that my mom was missing, right? I was in total disbelief. But what convinced me was the date that these pictures were uploaded. It was just 2 days after Mom's jewelry went missing. This was insane. Secretly, I hoped that my brain was just drawing conclusions. But deep down, I had a bad feeling. If I asked John about what I saw, I knew he'd just tell me what I wanted to hear. I racked my brain for hours, trying to figure out what to do. Then I texted John and invited him out for a date the next day. If he was gonna lie, I wanted him to do it in front of my face. The next day, I met up with John in the park. It was a beautiful day out, but I could hardly focus. I didn't know if he'd tell the truth, but there was no going back. John arrived with a smile. He walked up and gave me a big hug. I still don't know how to feel, so I was a bit tentative. "Is something wrong?" he asked, and I guess my behavior made it obvious that something was off. I told him that we needed to talk, and led him towards the benches by the edge of the park. It took me a second to collect my thoughts. It was now or never. I asked him about the jewelry again. I explained exactly what was missing, a pair of earrings and 3 bracelets. I even told him the date that it went missing. He just looked at me confused. "I have no idea," he said. "What made you bring this up?" I sighed heavily. "Sorry," I said. "My parents still insist that it was you." I grabbed his hands and looked him in the eyes. "But I told them that you would never do something like that because of how much we care about each other." He smiled at me, then reached up to brush some hair behind my ear. "Of course," he said. "I love you more than anything." I smiled back at him. "You do?" I pulled out my phone. "How about this page I found on Instagram?" John was speechless for a moment. He then insisted that the page wasn't his. "That's the first time I've seen this," he said. At that point, I had enough with John. He was a liar and a thief. And the worst part? My parents were totally right about him. I screamed, "We are done!" with tears in my eyes. I was extremely upset. I thought he really loved me. Before John could say anything, I skipped the scene and went back home. What I had to do next was actually the hard part. I had to tell my parents about my discovery. Later that night, I saw my parents sitting on the couch watching TV. I walked up to my mom, nervous and looking everywhere instead of her face. When I showed her the Instagram page I had found and apologized, "It was John," I said. I could feel my eyes start to water. She looked over to my dad, stood up and hugged me. "Thanks for finding it," she said. I tried to explain that she was right about John. I told her that I broke up with him and that I'll never see him again. But she just stopped me, kissing me on the forehead, saying, "It doesn't matter." I was happy to be over the feud with my parents, but to be honest, I was surprised by my mother's reaction. She didn't blame me or even utter the words, "I told you so." That night I couldn't sleep. I was hurt and heartbroken. What happened was just too crazy for me to deal with. I left my bed and went to the living room in hopes that watching TV will get my mind off of things, but it didn't. I was still mad and I had to do something about it. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and I started sending messages to John's new Instagram account. "I hate you. Send. You lied to me. Send. I will never forgive you." But before I pressed send, I noticed that something weird was happening. There was a buzzing noise coming from inside after every message. I pressed the send button, and again, I heard a buzz. It was coming from my parents' room. I went inside to see where it was coming from, and that's when I noticed something really strange. As I entered my parents' bedroom to check, my eye caught something shining in the dark. I got a closer look, and to my shock, I saw the allegedly stolen jewelry piled up on my mom's counter. That was seriously strange. Aren't those supposed to be with John? That moment, the whole picture started to become clear, and then it hit me. Oh my God. John never stole anything in the first place. That was all my parents' evil plan. They are responsible for the Instagram account, using John's name. I started breathing fast once I realized what I had done, how I treated John. I couldn't believe that I never actually looked deeper into the matter before accusing him. Immediately, I unblocked his contact and tried to call him. Of course, he didn't answer. It was 4 a.m. So I decided to send him a long text explaining what happened in hopes that it could undo my mistake. I thought long and hard about how I was going to confront my parents in the morning, but eventually, I just didn't. Why, you might wonder? Well, I really couldn't deal with them anymore, so I decided to get back at them in my own way. You see, John ended up understanding the whole situation, and he never blamed me for anything. And when I told my parents we got back together, the look on their faces was worth $1,000,000. "But he's a thief! He's a bad person!" my mom screamed in shock. To which I responded that I misjudged him because I found out that someone was pretending to be him on that account and that we had reported it to the police. Of course, I didn't really involve the police, but it put some fear in my parents and got them to back off a little bit. What my parents did was not okay, but at the end of the day, they were my parents, and they did it because that was their screwed up way of protecting me. I guess that sometimes we shouldn't really judge things too quickly just because they appear in a certain way. All in all, I was happy to be over with this mess. Please let me know what you thought of my story. Would you have done something differently? Let me know in the comment section below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories.